Hello everybody, this is Kate at the Library of Whispers, and today we're going to take a train journey, a steam train journey, the journey that I made last week when I was on holiday. This is a journey on the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, and the journey takes you from Whitby through to Pickering and various stations en route. So apologies for some of the bumpiness. It was quite difficult to take footage on a moving train, particularly an old moving train. And I'm also going to read to you from the North Yorkshire Moors Railway Guide Book as we go along. And we start off in a carriage which is not dissimilar to the carriage of the Hogwarts train, the Harry Potter train. It's one of those old-fashioned carriages where you actually sit opposite each other and there's a sliding door and you can see windows on both sides. So now we're going to have a little read of living history. There were not always steam engines on this railway. The trains used to be pulled by horses. The people of Whitby needed a railway to transport goods like coal and timber from the harbour to towns inland and bring produce to the ships in the port. In the 1830s, they asked George Stephenson for help. He recommended building a single-track railway to the market town of Pickering. And the advertisement says, "To contractors, the directors of the Whitby and Pickering Railway are ready to contract for the execution of the whole of the works on the remaining 8.5 miles of the Whitby and Pickering Railway. Plans, sections, drawings and specifications may be seen at the Railway Office, Whitby, between the 7th and 29th inst., after which date no tenders will be received. By order of the directors, George Stephenson, engineer." The first section from Whitby Harbour side to Grosmont opened on the 8th of June 1835, and no less than 9 timber bridges had to be built so that the railway line could pass over the River Esk. The building work continued southwards towards Pickering through a tunnel at Grosmont, climbing the steep slope to Goathland and crossing boggy ground over the moors. The hill to Goathland was too steep for horses to pull the trains up, so a pulley system was built, using a huge tank of water as a balance weight to haul loads up the hill. The Whitby to Pickering Railway took more than 5 years to build and was opened with great celebration on the 26th of May 1836. For nearly 10 years, horses pulled goods wagons, supplies and people between Pickering and Whitby along the railway line. In the meantime, railways began to spread across the country and steam locomotives became widely used. In 1845, the York and North Midland Railway Company bought the Whitby and Pickering Railway and rebuilt it with double track and heavier rails so that locomotives could be used to pull the carriages. A stone bridge and a larger tunnel were constructed at Grosmont, and 5 of the timber bridges were replaced by iron. New stations were built at Whitby and Pickering and still serve the railway and its many passengers. As the slope up to Goathland was too steep for locomotives, a new route had to be found. This deviation route opened on the 1st of July 1865, and it is this line that our trains follow today. A new station was built to serve Goathland. The old route between Goathland and Grosmont is now a popular walk called the Rail Trail. The York and North Midland Railway Company also built a line from the city of York to the seaside town of Scarborough, which included a link from Rillington village to Pickering. When the work was completed, The towns and villages along the route were connected to York and London. For the next 90 or so years, steam trains were the main form of transport and took businessmen, holidaymakers, courting couples, and 1,001 other folk back and forth. They carried coal, mail, newspapers and luggage, meeting the daily needs of the villagers and townsfolk along the route. By 1958, diesel locomotives were starting to replace steam, and more goods were being transported by road. Although services were popular on summer weekends, taking people to the seaside, there were a lot of empty seats midweek and in winter. Britain's railways had been owned by the government since 1948 and were struggling to compete with road transport. A national review was carried out by Dr. Beeching in the hope of reducing the ever-increasing costs of running the railways in order to make them profitable again. His plan was to close 1/3 of the country's railway stations and withdraw passenger services from around 5,000 route miles of the train network. These changes resulted in the loss of 70,000 British railway jobs over 3 years and the scrapping of 1/3 goods wagons. In June 1967, a small group of local people formed the North Yorkshire Moors Railway Preservation Society. Its members were convinced that operating the line between Grosmont and Pickering could be viable if sufficient voluntary help was forthcoming. They were convinced that one of the most historic railways in Britain, running through superb national park scenery and close to coastal resorts, must have tourist potential, not to mention being a possible lifeline to snowbound villagers in severe moorland winters. Interest in reopening the line spread rapidly, and at a packed meeting in Goathland Parish Hall, villagers and railway enthusiasts approved the formation of a company to negotiate with British Railways. On a snowy February day in 1969, the first engine to travel along the railway for almost 4 years set off from Pickering. The engine was a saddle tank named Mervale, and after frequent photo stops along the way, she arrived at Grosmont Station, which was almost lost beneath an enormous crowd, waving flags and cheering. So let's have a look at the journey. With the river to the left, the train heads into the village of Russup, passing through the station and crossing the road and then the river. The train pauses at the small station at Slights, as the driver telephones the signalman at Nunthorpe for permission to proceed. The countryside opens up into rolling pasture, and you may glimpse the locomotive up front as it travels round tight curves and over 9 bridges, as the River Esk is crossed and recrossed during the 6.25 miles to Grosmont. Just as you approach Grosmont, there are the remains of a brick kiln on the left. This is the Hoffman continuous kiln, a remnant of the Grosmont brickworks, which closed in 1957. Local clay was processed into bricks for construction. The Esk Valley line branches off to the right as you arrive at Grosmont Station, where you will find our Signals tea room, station gift shop, engine sheds with viewing platform and collector's corner shop. If you want to stay longer at Grosmont, you can book the station master's house for a holiday. That sounds nice. As the train departs southwards, it crosses the road at Grosmont, passes over the Esk River and through the tunnel, emerging alongside our locomotive depot on the left. In a few moments, you would see Stevenson's original 1836 route Heading up the valley, this is now part of the popular rail trail walk. The row of cottages at the hamlet of Esk Valley were originally built in 1873 for workers of the ironstone mine, which operated here between 1860 and 1876. Traces of railway sidings, buildings and mine shafts can be seen in nearby fields. As you cross the viaduct, you can look down on an embankment which is set at a right angle to the present line. This once carried the narrow gauge railway which brought whinstone from the quarries on the moor down to the original line near Esk Valley. Whinstone is a hard volcanic rock which forms a ridge across the North Yorkshire Moors for some 30 miles. On leaving the cutting, trains run on a ledge high above the valley floor, which is more than 100 feet below. After about a half a mile, the train crosses the Merk Esk on the Esk Valley Viaduct before passing under 2 more bridges. It then runs on a ledge high above the valley floor, which is more than 100 feet below. The train then turns east through a cutting which was excavated by the North Eastern Railway Company. A new farm had to be built to replace one that lay in the path of the cutting, and a road bridge was constructed to allow vehicles to pass over the line. You may get a glimpse of the cottages at Beck Hole through the trees to the right. In 1858, iron ore mines were opened on the far hillside, and the sleepy hamlet became a hive of activity. These mines were worked for several years until a landslip occurred one night, burying the tools and mine tubs, causing the mines to be abandoned. Stone from the buildings was then used to construct 4 cottages in Beck Hole and several buildings along Front Street in Grosmont. The line crosses the swift-flowing Ella Beck 3 times in quick succession before curving south at Darnholm. Towering above the train, you can see the cutting named Mill Scar, which for many years was notoriously unstable. Rock falls happened so often that a watchman walked the line each morning before the arrival of the mail train from York. The hillside above Darnholm attracts many photographers and visitors who like to watch trains battling one of the steepest railway gradients in the country at 1 in 40 up to the station at Goathland. Goathland is our celebrity station and is also known as Aidensfield in Yorkshire television's Heartbeat and as the bewitching Hogsmeade in the first Harry Potter film. The station is little changed since the day it opened on the 1st of July 1865 and features a tea room within a restored goods shed, original waiting rooms and a gift shop on platform 2. Goathland to Newton Dale is about 15 minutes. As the train leaves southwards from Goathland, Barner House can be seen to the right, adjacent to the road bridge which shares its name. The railway makes 3 crossings of Ella Beck and approaches Moorgates, the only place on the railway where a public road passes under the line. Here you can see a pair of gatehouses which were originally built to house railwaymen. On the right, near milepost 19.5, the present line rejoins Stevenson's original 1836 route, which crossed an attractive cattle arch bridge allowing the movement of animals. After a few minutes, you will see a sandcastle-shaped building on the skyline on the left. This is Fylingdale's Royal Air Force Station, a radar base which maintains an uninterrupted missile warning service and is also involved in the detection and tracking of orbiting objects, including the tracking of Santa's movements on Christmas Eve. The line reaches the highest point of the railway at 532 feet above sea level before crossing the Lyke Wake Walk and Fen Bog. This area is a nature reserve with a unique mixture of plants, dragonflies, and many bird species. There are remnants of the birch, alder, and willow forest that flourished here 10,000 years ago. The track bed crosses damp ground over a bog nearly 40 feet deep. When the line was originally built, fleeces stuffed with heather were sunk into the bog to provide a base for wattle fences before the farm foundations were placed. If you are seated towards the back of the train, you will have a clear view of the engine at the front as it swings round the curves of the line at low speed. After a further mile, the line enters a section of track where forestry plantations are close to the line and descends through North Dale. The valley sides are steeper here, and the cliffs of Killing Nab Scar can be seen upon your right. At the foot of Killing Nab is Newtondale Well, where traces of buildings and large stone tanks can still be seen today. These are a remnant of the days when many people came to take the natural spa waters. There were plans to develop the area as an inland spa to rival Buxton or Harrogate, but these never came to fruition. The train slows on the approach to Newtondale Halt, but will only stop if a passenger makes a special request to the guard or if someone is waiting on the platform. The line descends steeply through the dramatic Newtondale, and the driver whistles before the path across the line at Kidstyle Farm, which nestles below the cliffs of Huggett Scar. In 1857, an ironstone mine was opened in the valley, but the venture proved unsuccessful, and it closed some 10 years later. Skelton Tower, which can be seen high on the hill overlooking the railway, was built in 1850 by Reverend Robert Skelton, Vicar of Levisham. The line closely continues to follow Pickering Beck down the valley for the next 10 miles. Newtondale was carved out in the last Iron Age by the overspill from a huge lake, some 11 miles long and 400 feet deep in Eskdale. Much of the gorge is now forested, the plantations dating from a national campaign in the 1920s to make Britain self-sufficient in timber production. The engine whistles as it approaches a level crossing at Farwath, between a farm on the left and a pair of cottages on the right. These were provided by the railway company to house track workers. Market day trains used to stop here and at other isolated cottages to take goods or shoppers to Pickering Market, and many of these dwellings originally relied upon the railway to deliver their drinking water. Approaching Newbridge, you can see the railway's permanent way depot is passed on the right. Here you may see some of our cranes, wagons and other special vehicles that are needed to keep the track in good condition. The line then crosses the road adjacent to Newbridge signal box. As the train leaves this section of track, the driver gives the signalman the pouch containing the staff or ticket declaring that the line is clear. After the train passes level crossings at Trout Farm and High Mill, you will see the carriage and wagon sheds on the right, where all our carriages are repaired and restored. You may catch a glimpse of our turntable on the right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little journey and it wasn't too bumpy. This is Kate at the Library of Whispers saying, I shall see you very soon. Bye bye for now. Bye bye.